The goddess. When I mention the goddess, some part of you does not quite know what to do. You are not sure how to react to mention of her because for so long living lives on earth, you have been conditioned to choose to forget her and overwrite your memories of her. You have been trained to discount her and, in fact, vilify her and those who represent her in so many different ways. Your history with her is a long and deep-reaching one, and therefore there is another part of you that when I mention the goddess feels like you might finally be able to sigh a deep sigh of relief and want to hear more. This part of you has craved coming out of this vilification and abuse of the goddess and the natural feminine, the discounting and passing off of all thought of and concern for her as a superstition and the mark of the uneducated, irrational, ignorant, backward, and confused. I would like to set the stage for you to understand your previous level of relating to the goddess and why it changed and how that has served your journey as all that is learning about itself. Then I will discuss what you can do now to heal this relationship so that you can come back into balance within yourselves and your relationships with the earth, your bodies, and the rest of life. It was natural for you to personify the feminine in the form of the goddess. You perceived an intelligence in the order and functioning of the natural world, and as a result, you conceived of and addressed her as a being in some ways like yourselves. You were, of course, correct to do so, as she lives within you and through you. There is, in fact, an intelligence inherent in the natural world, and its wisdom is expressed in the cycles of nature of the seasons, the life cycles of plants and animals, and other, such as the tides. The earth itself is a vast energy system, and as you observed its workings and worked to live in harmony with them, you developed a relationship with the goddess as an individual. Each of your physical bodies, in fact, is an energy system working according to particular cycles and a certain logic, just as is the earth, and so you took into yourselves personally, on a microscopic scale, this relationship with yourselves as extensions of the goddess. Living in harmony with these cycles was not perceived by you to be work. It was simply a way of life. You understood the connectedness of all things, and you did not elevate yourselves or any other beings above other beings. This is not to say that all was easy and pleasant, but there was a simplicity about your living that you lost when you decided to elevate the masculine in an effort to put an end to your suffering. You saw the point of the cycles, and you understood and accepted that each being and each sort of being has a place in the scheme of things. Living in this way, one that honored the scheme of life in which you found yourselves, was a way of remaining connected to the goddess via the natural world. Over the millennia, you have put different faces on her and given her different names. At one point, however, there was just one goddess, just one divine mother figure who represented and held space for the feminine in your lives and consciousness, and whom you welcomed into your lives and consciousness. Your mythologies have become intrinsically linked to your conceptions of self, and therefore I would like to say a few things about them in this context. It is necessary so that as you open to returning to the original sort of connection you had with the goddess within you, you can step by step unlearn your specific conceptions of her and connect directly with her essence. You have been told many things about who she is and therefore who you are, and it is critical now that you shed these teachings and reconnect with your feeling about her and the reality of who she is. Those teachings were constructed and shaped over time so that you are inspired to do what you can to distance yourself from wanting to be like her or know her or live a life connected with her and the earth in full, natural, conscious ways. Not all of you have bought the shaped stories as they have been handed down to you, but being born into and living in a culture means being at least to some degree conditioned by that culture, and you are ready to leave behind the millennia of conditioning that seeks to distance you from yourselves, your divine essence. By putting so many faces on her, when you identify with one aspect of her, you do not identify with others. Splitting her in your mind into many pieces has afforded that you can focus on different aspects at different times. What happens is that you can then, over time, identify with those that make sense to you. You then see some faces of the goddess within you, and then you disconnect with the truth that all of her parts exist within you. And by that point, you have become distanced from the life cycle that you have before played out ceremonially, which actually showed you in turn all the faces of the goddess and how she was present and available to you in your living. This will seem to your mind like a clever strategy because your mind is the part of you that has decided that you need to be compartmentalized in order that you can be managed appropriately. The human mind attempts to control everything and therefore finds it necessary to classify, separate, and categorize all things for ease of analysis and control. As you have been living in dualism for as long as you have lived lives on earth, you have decided that you are this, but you are not that. You are this face of the goddess, but not that face. Putting a variety of faces on the goddess has served you in coming to understand certain parts of you one at a time, and this has been useful from the perspective of mind. Your journey of emphasizing mind has been important to you. Yet now you are ready to recapture the self-definition that is based in wholeness and not the classification, categorization, and control-based instructions of mind. Yet even this mind-based approach to understanding the goddess has over time been manipulated so that you at no one time inhabit the goddess in her wholeness, which is to say, inhabit yourselves in your wholeness. Living in dualism, you have forgotten that such a thing is possible because of these specific culturally contrived notions of who you are supposed to be. In some cases, you have lined these faces up in a certain order based on your chronological age, as in maiden, mother, and crone, and it has seemed to make a certain kind of sense in relation to how you live and how you age. Now, however, you are surrounded by invitations to reconnect with your multidimensional nature and begin to come out of black and white thinking. That is to say, come out of conceiving of yourselves and everything and everyone else through the lens of dualism as attached to time. All that I say to you is to stir you to open to knowing yourselves on all levels at once, including across time. And this opening of your consciousness is the path to inhabiting yourselves as God and Goddess, the divine beings that you are. If you were to know and accept the Goddess in all of her forms and see them within yourselves, you would be connected to your divine essence. You would therefore be uncontrollable because the natural feminine is and desires not to be controlled. And you would never do what cultural shapers tell you to do if it went against your nature. The more that you know who you truly are and accept it, the more you inhabit your divine power, because then you are clear that you are creating your world and life. You in that mode take responsibility for the hows and the whys of each and every single part of you, and that leads you to let go of fear in all its forms. The world is not acting upon you against your will, but you are creating all of this for yourself to experience as a soul learning how to be human. Another route to say this, with which you might be familiar, is that when you face your shadows and accept them as part of you, they are robbed of their power. You cannot then be controlled. because you cannot be led into fear. You have no dark corners within you that are terrified to have light shined on them, and others in your life who wish to control you cannot use such terror to their advantage to keep you believing you are fragmented and, therefore, powerless. The sides of the feminine that are not docile and do not readily submit to being controlled, you need to understand, have been made to shadows so that you will go to great lengths to avoid knowing and admitting them within yourself. As I have said, many Earth cultures over the history of organized life on Earth have sought to control you in a way that seeks, and has been very successful in it, to inspire you to do what you can to edit the natural feminine out of the options that you perceive are available to you. Many of these cultures have seen the truth that the feminine in all its forms cannot be valued equally as the masculine in any of its forms of social cohesion, according to their specific definitions and plans, is to be achieved and maintained. They have been clear that social order requires that chaos be controlled, and the chaos of the natural feminine has been labeled as a bad and dangerous thing. There is nothing that these culture shapers fear more than a woman who owns all parts of herself and loses fear about being herself, or a man who supports a woman owning all parts of herself and supports her in shedding her fear of her true nature. Speaking again about putting faces on the goddess, as you are now beginning to learn experientially about yourself as an energetic being existing across time and space, who is soul having a multitude of human lives at various points along the Earth timeline, you are invited to know yourself in your wholeness. To come out of this separation with yourself is to come out of a history of divisiveness, one that has been painful for all involved. When you take on becoming more whole as regarding reconnecting with the natural feminine in organic ways, you are blazing a trail that so many humans crave to step into. Please do this. Do this for yourself and do it for all the rest of you, the other portions of all that is that seek and crave to give themselves permission to finally be whole again. You are all ready and you crave permission to do it. Give yourself permission to do this, dear reader, and be willing to change the world for all. The different aspects of the natural feminine, when divided among these various goddesses, are the power of the goddess spread out or diluted. If you do happen now to identify with a couple of goddesses as they have been described through the one mythology or another, understand that this is where you are in this moment. Strive to open up to know more of yourself and choose not to remain stagnant in your level of scope of self-definition. You need no longer be deluded in order to fit into society, find an appropriate mate, or ensure survival in any way. By opening to these truths, you are changing the parameters according to which you are creating your world around you. You no longer need to limit yourself in order to be acceptable, safe, or loved. You are the divine. You are the goddess, men and women both. You are all that is. This issue of self-empowerment I discuss from many angles in many different places. It is one way the thrust of all that I have to say or could say to you as my commitment is to the unfolding and perfection of the divine plan, the path whereon you, as all that is, remember your true nature, and while you are incarnated as humans. This means that when you choose to open up to knowing yourself as multidimensional beings, you advance in your evolution as all that is. By knowing yourselves truly in all ways and accepting and loving all parts of yourselves, you are supporting the universe and all of creation in knowing itself. You are furthering the divine plan. Of course, I appreciate this and do all I can to help you along, but it is your creative power expressed through your choices that decides what happens in any given moment. And it is your choice about what happens next that will determine what will happen next. There is a very important point I would like to put your attention on here to end this section. It is wishing it were like the old days again. Because the connection to the natural feminine in a loving way is remembered by core parts of you as the way it should be and needs to be, there can be in your mind or heart a longing for the days when the goddess was revered and when the natural feminine was seen and incorporated into daily life, when it was seen everywhere and not vilified, not made the chaotic enemy that must be controlled at all costs, and not made the butt of jokes. It was not perfect by any means, but you felt at home in that way of being. You felt a part of the order of things, and you felt there was a sense to your experiences and your lives. You found meaning in the cycles and rhythms of nature that explained you and everything else to yourselves, and you felt rested in knowing you were a part of nature. But it is important that you do not long for this. Longing represents an energy leak and is related to the state of wishing, in which you do not see that you are empowered to make changes where changes are important for you to make. In a similar way, nostalgia is an escape through which you also lose energy. Do not spend energy trying to recreate the past. Take what you remember from that time and what you instinctively know. Realistically assess what you have learned since. See my comments about the purpose of the elevation of the masculine, diminishment of the feminine. And choose to create something that reflects what brings you joy about that previous state, but create it to be something that works for you going forward. Returning to any past will not serve you, no matter the past we might be referring to. There is nothing waiting for you in the past unless you learn from it and add it to where you are now. You can never go back on your evolutionary path. It is truly not possible. Yet where you try it, you might feel good for a while, but it will not truly serve you in your present state of evolution or where you are headed as divine beings remembering who you really are.